Hello everyone, welcome to our video in R programming. We continue with the functions this time, and we will see some basic examples how to define a function in R. So let's start with some examples as usual. So suppose we want to create a function that will calculate the Fibonacci sequence. So in R, when we define a function, as you see the keyword function, it basically creates a function, and we use the curly parentheses here. So if our function takes some inputs, we will write them here. And let's say if it doesn't take any inputs, then this will be empty, and you will have the parentheses. Within these parentheses, we write our code, whatever operations that we want to calculate. We will put it here. Let's say Fibonacci A and B. We put this as 1, and then we start to do some operations like printing with some print statements. We have, let's say, a comma here. We print the second number. And then we put a separator, let's say. Okay. And then we repeat. And we create another variable here. We sum the previous two numbers here, Fibonacci A and B. And then we will assign Fibonacci A and now Fibonacci B is equal to the temporary variable that we created, and then we will continue to display this. We put a comma here, and the separator is just empty. B is greater than 150. So if the number is larger than 150, let's say we want to put a break statement. So we will break now, and we put the break statement here so that we can stop this repeated operation here and get out of the function as well. And basically that will display what we have. So when we want to call a function, so first of all we can try to run this part, and if we didn't get any errors, basically there are no error messages on the screen, then when we want to call the function, we will call it by the name here. Sorry, it should be out of this parenthesis here. So if we run these two together, we can see that the Fibonacci numbers are displayed. As a result of this statement here, we are displaying them until the number is greater than 150. Then at that point we will stop. I mean, once the second Fibonacci number here is greater than 150, after that, after we display that, basically that will execute this break statement. And as you can see, once we exceeded 150, we enter to this, this condition becomes true. Then we executed this break now and break statement, ending the execution of this function. So this is one example. We can think about many different types of functions. For example, another simple operation, we can say, let's say, sum two numbers. I mean, we can create a function taking two inputs, let's say this time, different from the previous one. This function takes two inputs, and we can print, for example, x plus y. And then we will enter some values to our function. So again, we can execute, we can run this. If there are no errors, our function seems to be okay. And then we can check the sum of two numbers as we enter 10 and 9 for these inputs. So the total equals to 19, as we can see. And we can also return a specific result. So we can, instead of just using the print statements, our function can return a value, of course. So in that case, we can modify our function. So let's just continue with the similar example. And then we can use the return keyword here, and we can say return x plus y as an example here. And again, if our function have a return value, we can say z equals to this return value. So we can assign z to whatever our function returns here. It will be assigned to this z. And basically, if we run this, and then we can check our z value. So as we see, our z value equals to 19 because now it is assigned to as an output from this function. We can extend, we can construct some examples, some other examples. Let's say I have dummy 1, and I create this as a function here. I put my parentheses, and I assign some arbitrary values to my variables a, let's say vb here. And suppose we have another string. And suppose we have a sequence of numbers as 4 to 8. So this is our function 1. And then function 2 we can call as a dummy function, some arbitrary operations here. So let me copy this one. Now this time we can return something such as this variable dd, which is a vector of, which is a sequence of numbers here. So the first function, dummy1, simply assigns 4 different objects in its basically local environment, and it doesn't return anything. However, the second function here, it creates the same 4 objects and explicitly returns the last one, the last variable dd. So if we basically import and run 2 functions, both provide the same return object. So we can say, let's say we assign this function dummy1 to this guy, and then let's say we have another variable and we assign now dummy2 function, and then we can check the values of these functions. So we can run them. We can, sorry, first I need to run this part. As you see, if I didn't run and define the functions yet, then I will get an error. But once we define it, now we can call the function, we can call the second function, and we can check these values 4 or 5 up to, from 4 to 8. So this last guy is returned. And also in this function we explicitly use the return keyword and we return this dd. So in both cases, actually, the first one, this is returned. The last value is returned implicitly, but this time we have explicitly specify this variable is going to be returned. But at the end, both provide the same return object actually. So in that sense, that's the same, but it is for readability, it would be better to use the explicit return value. And we can have a third, let's say, dummy function. Let's copy this one and go over another example. So suppose we have, again, some arbitrary variables here. And let's say before the string cc, so we assign, let's say, return. And I want to return this AA. And then, let's say we have return BB here. So here dummy3 has two calls to return. One we have in the middle, one we have at the end. So let's execute it. So let's first run it. And then let's call this. So let's say xy equals to dummy3 here. And we call the function. And let's say we want to check now what is our output. Okay, so we can see that our output is now 2.5. Executing this dummy3 returns only the object AA because only the first instance of return is executed. Okay, and the function exits immediately at that point. So this shows us that writing these, multiple usage of these return keyword doesn't work. Once we execute this return, then basically the function exits, okay? It will not continue. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. So that's all for our examples for the simple user-defined functions. In the previous lectures, we already talked about built-in functions. So here we focused more on the user-defined functions, and in our other codes, as we progress, we will still continue to use more examples of functions. So thank you for watching.